Welcome back to New Rockstars, boys and girls. My name is Sam Bashor, and I'm here today to talk about Thor Ragnarok. No, I'm not dissecting another trailer, but you can find my Comic-Con trailer breakdown on this channel. I highly recommend it. Today, though, I'm here to talk about the future of the Thor franchise. I may have enjoyed the first Thor film a little bit more than most people, but the Dark World is pretty forgettable. Ragnarok, however, feels like a breath of fresh air. No longer are we dealing with these gods as some kind of aliens with super advanced technology that looks like magic. No. Now it feels like these are the real deal. We're going up against the goddess of death, and based on that final shot of the last trailer with Thor having lightning shooting out of his pores, this looks like it's gonna be a real clash of the titans. It's very exciting, I know, but where do we go from here? Sure, Thor has been confirmed for Avengers Infinity War and most likely the fourth Avengers film, but what about his franchise? Thor is one of Marvel's big boys, one of their top dogs, and there's a lot of lore that they could work through in future films. Okay, look, the reason I'm here today is because I believe we have hints as to where these films could go. Hints from the teasers and the trailers, but also from one of the producers of Ragnarok and director Taika Waititi himself. Here's the formal spoiler warning for Thor Ragnarok, the MCU, and some Marvel comics. Let us begin. Recently, Ragnarok producer Brad Winderhaum was asked which comic runs were used as inspiration for the third outing of our God of Thunder. Brad stated, "We're pulling a lot stylistically from Kirby, but we're also looking at Walt Simonson's Ragnarok arc and God of Thunder, the Jason Aaron book. We cherry-picked really fun elements out of it, Simonson's Ragnarok, both stylistically and narratively." Now, while the diehard comic fans might be losing their minds over this news, let's explain what this news means. First up, pulling from Jack Kirby's time working on Thor, Jack Kirby, for those of you who aren't familiar with his work, is the ingenious mind behind some of the most beautiful art in comics and most of the characters you love. Just for funsies, let's do a quick list. He helped create the Hulk, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, Silver Surfer, Black Panther, the New Gods, and the Avengers. Sure, there are other people who helped create these characters and teams, but Jack deserves his credit. Kirby also was very important to Thor popping up in Marvel Comics, building out his look to what we all know and love, but also his world. Kirby is most well known for his literal out-of-this-world cosmic landscapes. You know that super psychedelic, mind-melting sequence in Doctor Strange when Benedict Cumberbatch just flies through the multiverse and then turns into a bunch of little baby hands? You can thank Jack Kirby for that. We even see a glimpse of some of Kirby's stylings when we get a shot of the buildings of Sakaar and the Grandmaster's statue. These bright colors and wacky designs are very reminiscent of Kirby's creations for Thor, Fantastic Four, and the New Gods. You could even go as far to say that the antenna on the top of the Grandmaster's tower looks somewhat like Galactus's antlers. Could be, maybe not. Little nods like this is what makes me so excited for these movies. So saying Jack Kirby is part of the inspiration for this movie means something good, very exciting. But what about Walt Simonson? So hold your horses for a second while I pay respects to the man who made Thor a freaking god. Minus Norse mythology, of course, horse mythology. Walt Simonson, aka the other name attached to Thor over at Marvel, because Simonson at some points single-handedly created some of the most memorable parts of Thor's lore that fans love and added many aspects of Norse mythology to Thor comics that really fleshed out the characters. Simonson's 4-year run with the Thor title has been labeled by many as legendary. Why, you may ask? Well, he created a few iconic characters for Marvel, one being my personal favorite, Throg. Thor got turned into a frog for a few issues. It was pretty epic. Don't worry, he turned back. However, Throg returned to comics eventually because apparently there was a man who was turned into a frog. It was hanging out with Thor, who had been turned into a frog. And when the Thor frog turned back into Thor the god, a little sliver of Mjolnir was on the ground, and the other frog picked it up and it made a little mini Mjolnir. Ooh boy, I love comics. Now, someone else came up with the backstory for the other Throg, but still, this is just amazing. Simonson also created one other character that most casual comic fans should be familiar with, who can also wield the hammer of Thor, but I'll come back to that in a second. Also, by the way, Simonson is the guy who came up with the idea that Mjolnir comes back to Thor. Who doesn't love that idea? Also worth mentioning, Simonson created one of the most, unfortunately, forgettable villains in the MCU, Malekith the Accused. He's the guy in Dark World. Great name, kinda not great in the movies, but I do love how he's used in the most recent Mighty Thor comic run. Simonson also did some great work with Fenrir the Wolf, Scourge the Executioner, and many more that you're gonna see in Thor Ragnarok. The comics are a bit dated, but I've heard that Simonson's run is pretty good, so I might check it out. Anywho, the final writer that Winderhaum mentions is a name that made my brain start lighting up. Jason Aaron. Jason Aaron's God of Thunder book specifically, a book that most of my friends and myself like to call one of the best Odinson storylines, period. Odinson's referring to the Thor that is played by Chris Hemsworth. I know I've mentioned a few Thors, so to be specific, I'll use Marvel's nickname for him from now on. But back to the story. Jason Aaron, the God of Thunder storyline follows Odinson through 3 different periods of his life, encountering a being known as Gorr, the God Butcher. Gorr's drive in life is pretty interesting. Mainly it's to kill all gods in the Marvel universe, cause who needs them? Really, that's it. I mean, he's like literally a serial killer, but he does have some good points. But it's worth mentioning one of Gorr's main powers is the ability to manifest weapons. Sound familiar? Kinda sounds like the move Hela pulls out in the middle of the Thor Ragnarok trailer. Am I confused? Not mistaken. Also, director Taika Waititi backed this up in an interview. The villain Gorr has a very specific power of being able to manifest an infinite number of weapons. We've drafted that idea and are doing a version of that for Hela in our movie. That's very cool. The entire story of Ragnarok is very interesting. The idea of death and rebirth, plus you're dealing with the goddess of death, which is kind of basically the same as a god butcher in the general sense, right? Just don't fight me on this. It's not the point of this video. She kills gods, he kills gods. My point is, them mentioning Gorr could be a signal for where we could see Odin's son in the future. Let me explain. In the God of Thunder storyline, Gorr's main directive is to eliminate all living deities because he believes they're not needed, nor are they worth the adoration they receive from mortals, aka they don't do shit. While Odinson opposes Gorr, the God Butcher's ideas stick with Odinson, and eventually, without having to get into too many spoilers for a number of comic book storylines, the idea that no Asgardians are worthy of their divinity and adoration rocks Odinson so much that he becomes unworthy of his hammer. Thor can no longer hold his hammer. He leaves it on the moon. Now, doesn't that whole story sound somewhat familiar? Possibly because that's what it sounds like, Thor Ragnarok is exploring a little bit. Sure, we're not dealing with Gorr or the death of all gods in the universe, but we are dealing with the death of some deities, the ones we mainly know in the MCU, specifically the Asgardians. In short, in the story of Ragnarok, the gods and Asgard all die and are reborn. And Hela wants to bring this to fruition. And while we don't know Hela's exact motivation for this movie, my guess is that she's pretty angry at the Asgardians, probably for being locked up in hell or wherever she was for however many centuries. Maybe she's not feeling that the Asgardians are worthy of their praise any longer. Now just throw in Gorr's ability to manifest weapons and some things start to click into place. Sure, Mr. Taika Waititi stated they picked specific pieces they liked from Jason Aaron's story. They didn't straight adapt the whole thing, but bear with me. Odinson is without his hammer for a majority of this movie, we can assume. Yes, at the very least, we see Mjolnir get smushed in Hela's hands. Do you think it's possible that the reason Odinson wasn't able to take the hammer back from her was because she instilled some doubt in the God of Thunder? Maybe Odinson doesn't feel that he's worthy of the power of Thor any longer. This could be how Hela is able to get the upper hand and destroy the hammer. But of course, she could just be that OP, to be fair. What I'm getting at is that maybe by the end of Thor Ragnarok, Odinson no longer feels that he is worthy enough to be Thor. Now, I know what you're gonna say. Mjolnir was seen on the set of Avengers Infinity War, and from what I've researched, Chris Hemsworth will be in Avengers 4, but hear me out for just a second. Here's what I'm thinking. By the end of this third Thor movie, Odinson gets the hammer back because he realizes that he's worthy, or he makes a new hammer, or the hammer puts itself back together. It doesn't really matter. But he starts to question if the gods are truly worthy of wielding this great power. Fast forward through 2 Avengers movies, and I see a few scenarios. Odinson stays as Thor, and the status quo stays the same, and for the God of Thunder. That's whatever, kind of boring, in my opinion. 2, Odinson dies because the Russo brothers said that we'd lose some big-name teammates. Or 3, he decides he actually isn't worthy, and he leaves the hammer for someone else to pick up the mantle while he travels the cosmos or rebuilds Asgard or buys a farm next to his buddy Clint, and they all just, live together as a big old family. Personally, I prefer the last 2 options. I think this could be a really unique way to give Chris Hemsworth some much-needed rest from playing Thor for a few years. Maybe, and allow one of the many legacy characters to take up the mantle of Thor. It sounds to me like the most logical way not to burn out your actors and keep them interested in coming back for cameos. Because that's what we want. Now you're all probably starting to get curious. Which legacy characters am I referring to? Well, first off, for those of you who don't know, a legacy character means someone who took up the mantle of a classic character. Example, Wally West takes over Barry Allen's place as the Flash, or more recently, Miles Morales takes over as Spider-Man, or just became a second Spider-Man. It's confusing. For Thor, however, we have a few options. And the first first one on my mind is an original creation from the one and only Walt Simonson. Now, I mentioned this guy earlier. Anyone familiar with a certain Corbinite warrior who is worthy of wielding Mjolnir? Oh no? Not even sure what a Corbinite is? It's an alien race, kind of look like horses that walk on 2 feet in Marvel Comics that we've actually seen hints of in the movies, but hold on to that thought for just a second. I'm talking about Mr. Beta Ray Bill. This fan favorite character popped up during Simonson's dynasty and has been an important part of Thor's comic lore ever since. Now, who is Beta Ray Bill? Well, this character appeared in November 1983 during the whole Odin's son turned into a frog arc and was the first being outside of Asgard to wield Mjolnir. Odin was impressed by Bill and then fashioned him his very own hammer, named Stormbreaker. Ooh, not as cool looking as Thor's hammer, in my opinion, but who cares what I think? Beta Ray Bill is awesome. Now I know what you're thinking. This horse-looking dude hasn't appeared in the movies yet. How would an audience get behind such a character? Well, first off, we actually got a tease of the Corbinite race existing in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. Remember the opening scene where Star-Lord's dancing on that dead planet looking for that orb with the purple thing in it, and you see that skeleton and he gives it a spin? Bam, that's a Corbinite skeleton. I don't know, it was never confirmed, but I mean, come on. Marvel doesn't tease us for nothing, right? As for how Bill could be introduced in Ragnarok and future movies, it's tricky, I'll give you that. In Thor Ragnarok trailer breakdown we made, I stated that I believe the horse face being on the side of the Grandmaster's Tower was most likely Beta Ray Bill, or at least someone from the Corbinite race. Now, there's a chance, a slim one, based on how big this cast is for the movie, but still a chance that Beta Ray Bill could make a cameo in Thor Ragnarok during the gladiator matches on Sakaar. He does play a role in the Planet Hulk storyline, which is basically the first half of what this movie seems to be based on, so my guess is that he's a hidden member of Team Thor, or the Revengers, as Odinson called it in that one TV spot. So Bill could make an appearance as one of the fighters on the planet of Sakaar fighting for the Grandmaster. I'm even thinking that Bill could be one of the fighters that leads an uprising on Sakaar and helps Team Thor escape. This could open the door to Bill playing a big part in Avengers Infinity War and beyond as a sidekick to Odinson with his own hammer, and could lead to him starring in his own movie. But that sounds like a bit of a stretch, right? I have to agree, but not about him making an appearance. I'm standing by that. But I think I have an idea for another character that could take up the mantle of Thor. Now get ready, because this next fan theory that came to me made me so freaking excited. Are you prepared? If you're not familiar, at the end of the era in comics of Odin's son with the power of Thor, after Gorr's words finally take hold in his mind and make him unworthy to wield the hammer, a new individual is revealed to be worthy enough to hold Mjolnir, and Marvel gave unto us a gift. We received the all-new Mighty Thor, a mysterious woman whose identity was hidden from us until the last year or so. The character was revealed to be someone who played a major role in the life of Odin's son and has played a fairly major role in a majority of the Thor films thus far. Now, I'm pretty sure you're all aware that the original Team Thor in Thor 1 and The Dark World, Kat Dennings, Mr. Skarsgård, and Miss Natalie Portman, would not be returning for Ragnarok. However, I'm not buying it. Marvel duped us in X-Men Days of Future Past when Beast, Cyclops, and Jean Grey returned. Ain't falling for it again. I have a feeling that while in New York, Loki and Odin's son will be hunting down Doctor Strange and a hidden Odin in Central Park pretending to be a homeless man, and quite possibly we could see the return of Natalie Portman. I know a lot of fans weren't the biggest fans of her portrayal of Dr. Jane Foster, but hear me out for just a second. Comic book Jane Foster was revealed to be the secret identity of the all-new Thor. While fans of the classic Thor were obviously upset because that's what fans do, she has had a pretty amazing comic run, let's be honest. And her character, in my opinion, has a far more interesting journey than an omnipotent god. My theory? Marvel is going to be looking for new characters to be going out on their own adventures in Phase 4 and beyond, and Thor has always played an important role on the Avengers, but it didn't always matter which version of Thor was on the team. I think it'd be very cool to see more female-led Marvel movies, and Jane Foster Thor would be a perfect candidate. Why? Because her whole story revolves around her battle with cancer. While she does go through chemo, every time Jane picks up the hammer, she transforms into Thor, purging the cancer and the chemicals from the chemotherapy from her body. However, every time she transforms back into a human, the cancer returns as well, right back to the state it was before the chemo could take effect. So right off the bat, you have a compelling character who has the opportunity to turn into a god, become a superhero, but it's killing her. Also, the idea of humans overcoming their own shortcomings and becoming worthy enough for Mjolnir sounds like a pretty epic storyline. Now, if Marvel went with the story, they could still have Chris Hemsworth pop up in the background as someone who, supports Jane during her time of need, but is also hunting down this new Thor because he's worried. Already, so many layers to the story. You're welcome, Marvel. You already told this story in the comics, but I'm just getting excited about it. And to maybe quell some of your concerns about Natalie Portman's portrayal of Jane Foster so far, remember this. A lot of people weren't the biggest fans of the first Captain America movie. Then came the Russo brothers and made Winter Soldier, and then Civil War, and holy crap, Cap became such a freaking legend. Sometimes you just need the right creative team. I think seeing a human being given the powers of a literal god and taking on god-level threats while battling cancer could be a freaking badass, revolutionary superhero movie. But hey, that's just me. You could even throw Beta Ray Bill in that film, if he does appear in Ragnarok or future films as, like her partner, or possibly have Valkyrie, Tessa Thompson, and Jane team up for one of the first female-led team-up superhero movies. So cool. Oops, I just sold myself on that idea. Now again, these are just my theories. These could all be wrong come November. At the very least, we're all about to be treated to some Kirby and Simonson inspired art and production design on the big screen. That's just gonna be wonderful. But what do you guys think? Do you think I'm onto something, or am I just a wee bit crazy? I see potential in this new Thor franchise that Mr. Waititi is creating and the risks he and Marvel are taking, so why not go a step further? Start discussing this ASAP in the comments down below. Also, tweet me your thoughts and opinions. Am I totally wrong and this next Thor movie is actually just gonna be about Throg? I'd love it. Damn, I sold myself on another one of my ideas. If you guys like to get in touch, I'm Sam Bashor on Twitter. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Give this video a like and sub to New Rockstars if you haven't already. Also go check out all the other awesome breakdowns that we have on this channel. They're very cool. Have fun, you crazy kids, and I'll see you next time.